Kia ora koutou katoa, Markie here with another poem from the nation's favourite poems, Battered Anthology. And I should say, really, when I read these, where they score, because these were all, there's a hierarchy of viewer, BBC viewer voting. So this was number 4, as in 1 being considered the best. So yeah, it's just very high up there. So this was nominated by Marianne Havisham, and which is great. Thank you for that. It's great to hear what other people want to hear. She also mentioned a poem by Sylvia Plath, which isn't in this anthology, sadly. So at the moment, I'm just going to be sticking to this anthology. So, but maybe I'll dig out the other one at some point in the future and read the Sylvia Plath one as well. So, Not Waving but Drowning. So this is very well known. And I'm kind of familiar with this, but having read it through just now, it kind of hit me like it was like I was reading it for the first time. And the meaning kind of hit me, I think, for the first time. It's funny, really, because I can be very good at interpreting the meaning in things, and sometimes things just go straight over the top of my little head. Or maybe it's just about timing or the space that you're in or whatever it is. But this is not one of the poems that I used to regularly turn to. So yeah, so it's good to be encouraged to look at something else. So, nobody heard him, the dead man, but still he lay moaning. I was much further out than you thought, and not waving, but drowning. Poor chap, he always loved larking, and now he's dead. It must have been too cold for him. His heart gave way, they said. Oh, no, no, no. It was too cold always. Still the dead one lay moaning. I was much too far out all my life, and not waving, but drowning. Whew, yeah, that's kind of hit me for the first time, really. So, yeah, I mean, the first thing that strikes me is depression. But not just depression, many other things, really. About how often as human beings we can actually be struggling massively, and people just don't get it. They think we're waving, but we're drowning. People don't want to see it, really. They kind of, their denial kind of covers it up, covers it over. And often people are waving, as in, so they are waving, but not waving in a friendly way. So really what we're talking about is waving and drowning. It's waving as in calling for help. So quite often people are kind of signalling for help, and we don't give it to them. Poor chap, he always loved larking. So we just don't see people. We just often don't see people's suffering. It's kind of interesting, I think, how human beings can be fantastic, and can sometimes respond to other people in a marvellous way. But it's funny what we respond to and what we don't, what we consider a crisis and what we don't consider a crisis. And there's some things that we don't take as seriously. So we're very good at responding to somebody that's in bereavement. We kind of get that, so somebody's got somebody close to them that's died. We pour, sympathy and empathy and help and support on that person. Not for too long, we kind of expect them to snap out of it fairly soon. but we do recognise that and acknowledge that. I'm thinking about the kind of workplaces and things like that, and how they would respond. But actually, you could losing a partner can be a terrible thing. Can also be, a liberation. So just because someone's close and they die doesn't necessarily mean that there's more suffering than somebody. And for example, I had a friend who committed suicide, and nobody really responded to that. in terms of kind of worrying about me or offering me sympathy or being concerned about my well-being. You know, they knew that I was attending a funeral. They, you know, I'd said what had happened, not in detail, but you know, people kind of, you know, didn't really express a great deal of concern, really. But other times and other things, they would express a lot of concern. So it's kind of interesting, isn't it, that we think people are waving when they're drowning, and sometimes people are going through, you know, situations that might sound worse than they actually are, you know, and they're actually doing okay. It might be the death of somebody very close, but you know, it's somebody that's you know, been suffering for a long time, and the death was expected, and it's a release, and actually the grieving process isn't as bad. So yeah, we think people are waving, but they're drowning. So yeah, it's I think I've noticed this. You know, sometimes I think, you know, sometimes people responded very generously and very helpfully and helped me at certain times in my life, but actually sometimes probably at the hardest points in my life, nobody's noticed, you know. I don't know why I'm laughing at that. That's not funny, is it, really? So yeah, powerful poem. So thank you, Marianne, for recommending that one. It's been good to properly look at that. And on a lighter note, I can't help thinking of the little advert, you know, public service announcement, as I'm showing my age now. But this is in the age of not quite Tufty, you know, a little bit later than Tufty, but a little animated announcement, and it was about. And this came on I think it must have been BBC. It came on the television in between the programmes, and it was a little man and his wife sitting on a cliff having a picnic, and looking out to sea with binoculars, and saying, "Oh, look, there's a man in a rubber sailing dinghy. Oh, look, he's waving." So I think I must have been inspired by this. I'm not sure when this was written, but yeah, so Stevie Smith died in 71. It would have been after then. So yeah, that must have been inspired. And also I wrote a poem that referenced this, actually. It was about bad poetry. So I'm going to put my poems on my Patreon channel and read my own poetry on there. And one of the, I can never remember, but there's only one of my poems that I can remember in full. And only one of somebody else's poems that I can remember in full. But I did a poem called Bad Poetry, and it referenced lots of different poems. So one of the things it said something like, and when I think of Robert Browning, I'm not waving, but I'm drowning. So yeah, so funny, I've drawn on this, but more on the title, really. Obviously, I haven't really given this poem the attention that it deserves. So without wanting to sound like Ellen DeGeneres, you know, a lesson there for all of us, really, in not trusting our own judgment, maybe, or always checking out with somebody how they really are, rather than making an assumptions, or basing how they cope with things with how we might cope with things, or making assumptions about how people might be. Best way to find out how somebody is to ask them. But also you have to ask in a certain way, don't you? Because most of the time when people ask how we are, you know, they're asking in a way that they don't really want the answer. I don't actually ask people how they are unless I want to know. So I always want a real answer when I ask people how they are. If I'm you know, not in a space to hear or whatever, I don't ask. But yeah, ask people how they are, and give them space to give a real answer. And remember that people might be struggling when we don't realise they are, because there might not be anything that concrete that we can see that's going on for them. But like this one, I was much too far out all of my life, and not waving but drowning. Thank you for watching. Rangimarie. Whoops.